Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. So this is the second video that I made regarding the Karmelo Anthony incident that left a 17-year-old white kid dead. And as I did in that first video, I'll do it again, and I mean it sincerely. My heart goes out to the family of Austin Metcalf. And I also understand what the family of Karmelo Anthony is also going through. As I said in my first video, there are no winners in this case. Everyone loses here. Both of these families' lives will never be the same. And I say that on a personal level. I have lost young loved ones in my life. Okay? 2 younger brothers to be exact. And I have represented thousands of people who were charged with criminal offenses. So I know how devastating these matters can be, and I sincerely grieve with the Metcalf family. And my heart is broken also for the Anthony family. Now, many of you have shown up and you've made comments on my video, which, fine, we want you to do that. If you have comments, make those comments. But here's the thing. First of all, watch the whole video. If you're going to make a comment, do yourself the favor of watching all of the video from start to finish so that you can make an informed comment and not one that I know immediately that you did not watch the video. Also, my video yesterday about this matter was limited to statements that Karmelo made, allegedly, and to how the police conducted itself in its engagement with Karmelo. And the biggest part of the video was to warn other people not to make statements to the police ever. I cannot think of a good reason for someone who is the target of a criminal investigation to talk with the police without legal counsel present. And it's the very reason why, in certain circumstances, law enforcement is required to warn them of what will happen with those statements. It's called a Miranda warning. And some of you disagree with me about when Miranda was required in this matter based on the arrest report. Now, here's the thing. You got your opinion. However, many of you have never been to law school. You've never taken a bar exam. You've never studied the law. You're not an attorney. You haven't tried any cases. So you're just basically giving your uninformed opinion, which fine, that's fine. But you give your opinion as if you know what you're talking about. And you know you don't know what you're talking about. I know you don't know what you're talking about. Your opinion is based on what you have seen on television and movies, what you heard, what you think, etc. My opinion is not based on that. My opinion is based on almost 2 decades of practicing law, representing thousands of criminal defendants, trying murder cases, and using self-defense and so forth. So my opinion is an informed opinion. It doesn't mean, for example, the prosecutor and the judge and jury will not agree with me. But it is an informed decision from having studied the law for 3 years and another year to pass the bar exam, and again, having practice going on 2 decades. All right? So watch the video and don't sound so sure of yourself when you know you really don't know what you're talking about. All right? And so what I want to do in this video is talk about the charges, the defenses, and to see if there's any sort of justification for what allegedly happened to Austin Metcalf. All right, let's go. Karmelo is charged with murder. He's charged with criminal homicide under the Texas Penal Code. So we're going to look a little bit at what that all means. Now, before we go further, let's look at a couple of statements that were given in this matter. Now, Maria Guerrero is a journalist with NBC, okay, the local NBC affiliate here. And so I found this statement by looking at her social media profile. So here is the statement that Karmelo's attorneys gave, Billy Clark and Kim Cole. And it says, quote, Karmelo and the entire Anthony family are sincerely saddened that a life was lost and offer their condolences to the family of Austin Metcalf. During this difficult time, we urge the public to refrain from rushing to judgment before all the facts and evidence are presented. That's right. Karmelo, like all citizens of the United States, is entitled to a fair and impartial legal process. That is right. We are committed to ensuring that Karmelo's rights are indeed protected throughout each phase of the criminal justice system. So that is the statement that they gave. I think it was a very good statement. It started out first and foremost expressing condolences for Austin Metcalf, which was absolutely the right thing to do. Absolutely the right thing to do. And we all, again, send our condolences to the Metcalf family. Okay? All right, now, this is a statement that was given by the chief of police. And I'm not going to read all his statement, but I'm going to read this first paragraph because I don't like it, to be honest with you. He says, this week, our Frisco community suffered the devastating loss of one of our young residents because of a senseless act of violence. You see, when the chief of police puts that out there like that, a senseless act of violence. Well, we don't know that to be the case yet. This is the police's side of the story. We don't know if it was a senseless act of violence. It may turn out to be, but we don't know it. It's premature to say all of that right now, which is why I'm not getting into the facts at all, or at least I'm not going to characterize the facts as true as the evidence as being true or not true, because I don't know. I wasn't there. As an attorney, we don't jump to conclusions like that. We like to get our hands on the discovery from the state and, of course, do our investigation, talk to all the witnesses, get all the videos, get all of that, and then we're able to say what the facts are and what the facts are not. So if I don't do that in our cases, I'm not going to do that in someone else's cases. So I think it was premature, and it likely makes it more difficult for Karmelo to get a fair trial in Collin County when the chief of police is on the record, on the written record, saying it was a senseless act of violence. And that in and of itself can, taint the jury pool. It can give rise to community anger and so on. I don't like that. I don't like that. I thought hard about even reading it in this video, but I decided to, and while at the same time, because at the same time, I'm going to, as I am, condemn this. That should not have been said. So if you have already heard that, I want you to know that that is unfair. And why is it unfair? It's unfair because, here's why it's unfair. Because Karmelo Anthony is presumed to be innocent. He is presumed to be innocent. So right now, under the law, Karmelo Anthony is presumed innocent. He is not convicted of this. He has not pled to this. A jury has not found him guilty of this. So right now, he is under the law as innocent as you and I are. And so saying this here from the chief of police, of all people, was bad. Was bad. All right, now, criminal homicide. Let's talk about it. A person commits criminal homicide if they cause someone's death intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence. All right, so we see those four different mental states: intentional, knowingly, reckless, or negligent. All right, if someone causes someone's death under any of those mental states, then that is criminal homicide under Texas law. Criminal homicide includes murder, capital murder, manslaughter, and criminally negligent homicide, section 19.02. All right. Murder. A person commits murder if they intentionally or knowingly cause another person's death. So you can't commit murder recklessly. You can't commit murder negligently in the state of Texas. It has to be intentional or knowingly. Okay? If you accidentally kill someone, or if you do something reckless, some states do recognize recklessness as the mens rea to find someone guilty of murder. We have to prove, or the state has to prove, intentional or knowingly. All right? Now, there is something also in Texas law called sudden passion. All right, let's read this. Except as provided by subsection D, an offense under this section is a felony of the first degree, which here in Texas carries up to life. At the punishment stage of a trial, the defendant may raise the issue as to whether he caused the death under the immediate influence of sudden passion arising from an adequate cause. If the defendant proves the issue in the affirmative by a preponderance of the evidence, the offense is a felony of the second degree. So it may turn out, if Karmelo Anthony if he goes to trial on this murder charge, it may turn out from the evidence that he acted under sudden passion, right? If it goes to trial, his legal team may argue that because he was being pushed, because he was being asked to leave and all of that, he acted out of a sudden passion. Maybe he overreacted, or several different reasons why it could be sudden passion. Now, what they would also have to show is that the sudden passion arose from an adequate cause. Typically, when we talk about sudden passion, we talk about it in the context, say, of a man coming home and finding his wife in the bed with another man, and he just loses it. We typically talk about sudden passion in that context, but it's not limited to that context. So this may be one of the things that his attorneys will argue if this case goes to trial. And that assumes the grand jury indicts him and they can't work out any sort of plea agreement and it goes to trial. Then this statute says at the punishment stage of a trial, the defendant can raise this issue, that it was sudden passion, that he's young, he's immature, he lost his cool, lost his temperature, and so forth. All right, so there's a sudden passion here, and if so, then that would take the offense down after he's been convicted, okay? That would take it down to a second degree, which carries up to 20 years. Okay, carries up to 20 years rather than life as a first degree murder. Then he also has self-defense that his legal team could also offer as a defense. So this says a person may use deadly force if they are justified under section 9.31 and they reasonably believe it is immediately necessary. In other words, first, you have to show that the defendant was justified to use force, just regular force. And then on top of that, you have to show that the defendant had a reasonable belief that he needed to use or she needed to use deadly force in order to prevent, let's read on, in order to defend him or herself against unlawful deadly force or prevent imminent aggravated kidnapping, murder, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, robbery, or aggravated robbery. Once self-defense is raised the state must disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. All right, so there's a lot right there in this self-defense statute. I have tried murder cases, have defended people in murder cases, and have relied on this statute many times. And so let me show you how this typically plays out in a trial. So what the defendant must show is that their use of deadly force was reasonable. And some have already jumped to conclusion that if Karmelo did this, as he has alleged to have done, then they're out there in social media saying that it was not reasonable for him to use a knife and the other kid didn't have a knife, or that kid didn't have a deadly weapon. Well, let me tell you this. Again, the way this tends to play out in trial is you have to put the defendant on the stand. Now, if it's a defendant who has a lot of baggage and record and so forth that you don't want, putting out there, then you don't put them on the stand. But typically, you have to put this person on the stand so that they can articulate why it was reasonable for them to use deadly force. And the way we do it here in the state of Texas is a subjective standard. So the jury has to look at it from the defendant's perspective. And listen, police officers do it all the time. So many times they have killed, especially black people, gotten on the stand and have said, I thought he was reaching for a gun. Right? When it turns out he was only reaching for a cell phone or to get his license. And how many times have a police officer been acquitted because in the minds of the jury members, the police's position was reasonable? So it's likely at trial, if this case goes to trial, it may be that Karmelo take the stand and articulate why it was reasonable for him to use deadly force in this matter. And again, all of this is alleged. Every bit of this. The state hasn't proved anything. Karmelo is still presumed innocent. So I'm speaking about this alleged incident where Karmelo stabbed this young man to death. If they go to trial on this, then again, Karmelo can argue self-defense, and he could take the stand and explain why he thought deadly force was necessary. It'd be up to the jury to decide if that use of deadly force was reasonable. It won't be up to the judge. It won't be up to the prosecutors. It won't be up to the defense lawyers. It'll be up to the jury as they listen to Karmelo explain himself. The point is, it all comes from Karmelo's standpoint. It's a subjective standard. It's not an objective standard. It's not what you would have done or what a reasonable person would have done. It is what was going on in the mind of Karmelo. That's what this is going to come down to. So people jump into conclusions about this. These are people who are not lawyers. They're not lawyers. They have never tried cases, murder cases, self-defense cases. They are just running their mouths. That's it. Because these are tough cases. These are tough cases. These are emotional cases. There are rules of evidence that have to come into play. The judge is sitting up there making decisions about whether this comes in, whether that comes in, whether this comes in, whether that's right, whether this is wrong. So don't jump to any conclusions just yet. Don't say, well, they didn't find any weapon on Austin, then that means this was not a justified use of deadly force. You don't know. You got to wait. You got to wait. Our system requires that we treat Karmelo as though he is actually innocent. We presume his innocence. And then you let all the facts come in. What you have heard so far has been the police, has been the chief of police, has been their arrest report. Well, witnesses said this and witnesses said that. Well, those witnesses got to be, they got to be tested. Are they biased witnesses? Are they being honest? Did they actually see anything? So all this has to be hashed out inside the courtroom. All right? Inside the courtroom. So he's charged with murder, but there is the sudden passion, defense. There is self-defense. Now, possessing a knife at school. I've seen this question raised. Under Texas law, okay, let's go back. Under Texas law, it is a crime to knowingly, intentionally, or recklessly carry a prohibited weapon on school grounds or at school events. A knife with a blade over 5.5 inches, called a location-restricted knife, is a third-degree felony if brought onto school property. So we don't know. Is the blade over 5.5 inches? There's so many questions we just don't know. It's just going to take time for all of that to come out. Now, the grand jury, eventually, I heard the district attorney in Collin County say today, in fact, that he predicts it'll be about June before the grand jury gets this case, before they present it to a grand jury. And the grand jury will decide if this knife thing should be indicted as a third-degree felony. We'll know soon enough. And keep this in mind, even if the grand jury does indict him, that still doesn't prove that he's guilty. Because then a regular jury has to hear the evidence in the case, and their standard is not probable cause like the grand jury. Their standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Probable cause is here. Beyond a reasonable doubt is way up here. It's a much stronger burden to meet. Okay? Now, I'm just giving you the law here and just trying to give you some perspective on how these things play out here in Texas. All right, now, I want to talk about parole eligibility in the state of Texas. And I specifically want to talk about Section 42.12, subsection 3G of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure. When an inmate is eligible for parole, an inmate who has been found guilty or pled guilty to an offense in Texas, if it comes under this category, 42.12, subsection 3G, it is handled differently. All other parole eligibility cases are handled as just regular cases, and their parole eligibility comes up just based on a regular schedule. But if it's a 3G offense, which covers offenses like murder, capital murder, indecency with a child, aggravated kidnapping, human trafficking, aggravated sexual assault, aggravated robbery, burglary of a habitation, and so on. These are real serious offenses. So parole eligibility for those offenses tend to occur later than normal. Okay? So, as applied to this case in particular, if Karmelo Anthony is found guilty of murder, first-degree murder, then he would be facing from 5 years to life. Now, the question is, when would he become parole eligible? Well, if he got life, he would become parole eligible after serving 30 years. If he was found guilty on murder, the first degree, but the jury gave him, say, 40 years, then he would have to do 20 of those years before he was even eligible for parole. That doesn't even mean that he gets out, but it means that his parole eligibility would begin at that point. So it's either for a first-degree offense, it is either 30 years if it's a life sentence, or it's half of what the sentence is for 3G offenses. Okay? Let's say it's a second-degree felony. Let's say, for example, as I talked about sudden passion, let's say the jury decided that sudden passion applied here, which would bring it out of the first-degree status to murder in the second degree, then Karmelo would be facing up to 20 years. And let's say the jury gave him that 20 years. Then he would be parole eligible after 10 years. And if someone was facing, say, a third-degree felony, they would be facing half of that sentence before they became eligible for parole. That's what a 3G offense is. Another thing that triggers a 3G offense is whether or not there is a deadly weapon finding. If someone committed a crime using a deadly weapon, then that 3G parole eligibility requirement would kick in. All right, so I wanted to go through that because that will be applicable in this case as well if Karmelo is found guilty or if he pleads guilty. Don't jump to conclusions. Wait on that. There is a Bible verse that I use all the time. I use it in every jury that we pick, in every trial that we go to. There's a Bible verse that says everything or anything sounds true until you hear the other side. And you have not heard the other side yet. The defense has not put its side out yet. And it probably won't be until if there's a trial. Okay? Now they may do a press conference or something, but their side of the story has not been put out there yet. So we've only heard the state in this matter, the police chief, and so on. And the scripture says every story seems plausible, believable, true, until you hear the other side. Okay? All right? All right, so that's what I wanted to walk you through with this matter. I've been hearing all these people who know nothing about the law making all sorts of comments about this case and other cases, and they don't know what they're talking about. Yet, it seems like folks tend to gravitate toward that rather than listening to the experts. That's the YouTube culture. Okay? But this right here should help you understand some of the twists and turns and ins and outs of this incident. I pray for both families. I sincerely do. I have been through this, again, personally and professionally. I know what they're feeling. I pray for the Metcalf family again for the third time, and I pray for the Anthony family. Thank you for watching this video, and peace and blessings to these families.